It is the 7th model introduced in the Digimon collaboration and the 4th introduced in the 2024 run, sporting the likeness of the glimmering golden royal knight Magnamon. It is DGM06 Magna Knight, with a mostly new kit of wide beam, thunder beam, short beam, biped legs, and the leg ability of Glint, which is a brand new leg ability that adds a percentage of the leg's combined shoot and melee resist into bonus damage when using an Optic type skill. Now, as if Imperial Drago, Apocalypse, and Mugendra Borg weren't enough to really hype up a lot of the Digimon Metabot fans, Magna Knight is most certainly no exception, with a very iconic look, glimmering gold armor, and a very synergetic kit that certainly will turn the tides on any Optic attribute fighters, as he now stands as king of that type of warfare. Wide Beam on the head part is an Optic attribute skill that operates like standard beam, which will get a double damage bonus and a triple damage bonus at 30% and 100% damage charge gauge respectively. The difference, however, compared to regular beam, is that Wide Beam is an AoE type of attack, which means it will damage all 4 parts or all active parts of the target equally and spread the damage across them all. But something to note about this is that unlike regular beam, which is mostly used for spot nuking more than anything else because of its inability to pierce, Wide Beam honestly kicks that weakness to the curb, because now, even if it has to spread the damage, it's still able to attack multiple parts at once, and if not breaking multiple things, making it a lot easier for someone to come up behind Magna Knight and finish the job. And with a base power of 2240, he's already clocking some really painful damage when he does go to fire it off. Thunder Beam on the right arm is a new skill that basically is a combination between beam and thunder. So while it will get the damage bonus of double and triple at respective charge gauge, much like Wide Beam will, this one's got a little bit more of a kick to it. Instead of being able to be used as spot nuking or get any extra perk like AoE bonus or anything like that, Thunder Beam, much like the name implies, will also stun the enemy where they stand, making it a lot easier to buy yourself a few extra precious seconds of time to recoup, or even stall a more dangerous enemy and make it easier for someone to come behind Magna Knight and really lay on the pain before they get the chance to cripple your strategy. So it's going to be a very solid spot nuke, much like standard beam might be, but the ability to stun enemies in their tracks does forgive its inability to pierce just a little bit while still keeping the damage bonuses of standard beam. Short Beam on the left arm is another brand new skill that Magna Knight is introducing to synergize perfectly with his other new skill of Thunder Beam. But to explain Short Beam briefly, it also does behave like standard beam, with the double and triple damage bonus relative to your charge gauge, but this one also gets a little bit more of a kick to it. Instead of being able to stun the enemy or damage multiple parts at once, Short Beam gets a damage plus of double damage if the opponent that they're attacking is already stunned. Which, would you look at that, Thunder Beam stops enemies in their place, so that makes a perfect 1-2 shot right there to really lay on the pain. And on top of that, also is packing pierce damage. So this is going to be the arm that you're really going to be cooking on to really get some damage and even some charge going without having to really spend a lot of turns charging and doing it. Plus, it also does forgive a lot of the weaknesses of Beam, much like Thunder Beam or even Wide Beam do. So it's a very synergetic hit as a whole and a very powerful 1-2 punish that makes use of it very solidly. Plus, with the leg ability of Glint, any Optic attribute skill that he uses, which, newsflash, all 3 of his parts are indeed Optic attribute skill, he is going to be adding a percentage of his leg's resistance stats as bonus damage, which means they're going to be hitting even harder than that. When it comes to numbers, he's certainly not pulling any punches either with his armor, with a base head armor of 4019, arms just shy of 3500, and legs just close to 3700. He's probably going to be a little lighter on the armor compared to most of the others introduced thus far, but he does make up for it in other ways. A mobility of 909 is very good, as it means he starts off the line on a very impressive and a very good speed note for biped legs as a whole. An evade of 1200 is also very good, as it means he can dodge or graze pretty consistently well, and being able to keep the damage on him as low as possible or even non-existent at that. But where he's really cooking with his numbers is the melee resist of 1117 and the shoot resist of 1618. While those numbers are kind of in the normal category of what you'd expect for a pretty well-rounded bipedal leg, especially of a shooter type much like Magna, reminder of his ability of Glint. The higher your resist stats, the higher of a damage bonus percentage you get added to your attacks when using an Optic attribute skill. So when you use Wide Beam, Thunder Beam, or Short Beam, or even any other Optic attribute skill you choose to kit him with, he is going to be getting just a little bit more of a bonus on top of that before he even goes to attack. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Magna a pretty well-rounded 8 out of 10 and a very high score at that. While normally a lot of attacks that use Beam I don't really tend to grade very well, Magna takes a lot of the weaknesses of the standard Beam attack, adds new perks to them, and uses it in an incredibly synergetic kit that, whether or not you have a charge behind the attack, is going to be immensely painful or incredibly useful based on which way you choose to use it. Between Wide Beam, Thunder Beam, and Short Beam, again, all of those synergize with Glint incredibly well for extra damage bonus on top of that. Thunder Beam and Short Beam also synergize incredibly well for that 1-2 punish punch with stunning enemies and then punishing them for stunning them, and then Wide Beam for your overall coverage damage for hitting a lot of your heavier targets and making it easier for him or somebody else to come behind Magna and finish the job. And with very well-rounded numbers, Magna can fill a lot of pretty solid niches remarkably well. Granted, the enemy is not using Optic Guard to nullify him completely. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little lower at a 7 out of 10 for these same reasons. While he certainly does make himself heard as the new king of Optic attribute skills, spreading his parts or even using his parts on other bots or even other teams may or may not bring you a certain yield of usage. Thunder Beam and Short Beam honestly are very obviously meant to be used together as a 1-2 punch, so you want to try to keep those pretty close to each other if possible, if not on the same bot. Wide Beam you may or may not use super often, if at all, and given that it's a head part, it's going to be really hard to capitalize on any damage bonuses with charge unless you choose to charge first. And the leg ability of Glint is nice, but if you're not using an Optic attribute skill, Laser, Beam, Short Beam, Hyper Beam, Beam Sword, or anything else of the like, you're going to be missing out on that extra damage bonus entirely and pretty much wasting half the reason you use the legs in general. So the general idea of Magna is, if you're going to use him, make sure you use him as a pure set or something very close to using only Optic attribute skills to really capitalize on how incredibly synergetic he can be.